I have finished another of my five before you buy. I kind of broke the rule in the five before you buy because I ended up doing a book called While I Was in Washington, D.C. But hey, that's one of those things that I'm going to make an exception when I'm traveling somewhere for my buying. This is the book I did finish while I was on the trip, though. This is Killing Kennedy by Bill O'Reilly. Ostensibly, I actually believe it is more by the secondary author Martin Dugard. I have read some of these Bill O'Reilly books before. I have read Killing Reagan. There's a whole lot of them. Killing the SS, Killing Lincoln was the first one, I think, was the first big one. Killing Jesus. I mean, they're killing Martin Luther King Jr. There's a whole bunch of them. It's basically, they're all tied to people who were assassinated or famous deaths that were kind of out of the ordinary. And Bill O'Reilly slaps his name on them. I don't think he even proofreads these at any point in time. Because the Killing Reagan one, from what I understand about Bill O'Reilly, and I am no expert, but from what I understand about Bill O'Reilly, he is a conservative pundit from what I know. And it seemed very strange to me that the Killing Reagan one was not particularly flattering to Reagan at all, which that's a strange thing for conservative sort of stuff. This book, which you have a Democratic liberal president, was very flattering to Kennedy, not at all to LBJ, which they were both very liberal in what you were looking at, but I would have expected the Kennedy part to be like really dwelled on his tomcatting around and stuff like that. This was not. In fact, this was one of the most interesting books I've read about Kennedy, and I'm going to say it's the Martin Dugard that's the driving force here, because I just do not see Bill O'Reilly being able to pull this off. The only thing I didn't like about it is he has this style that's one of those things that's like, the man who had 2 months to live did such and such. It's like this countdown sort of a thing, which, yes, we know it's not a twist ending, that we know he's going to be assassinated. Yeah, we're all very aware. But bringing that up constantly is just very awkward. It's a writing conceit that I don't particularly like. It's a very awkward one. It's one that actually, there was an episode of Mystery Science Theater where the movie kept doing that, and they made a comment about how annoying that was when they would talk about the woman who had 2 days to live. It's I get it, you're trying to build tension, that something is about to happen, but it doesn't work right. I hate to say it. Now, everything else is very, very good. Duggar goes into great detail about Kennedy and the whole situation with the PT boat that he was involved with, and kind of what he made his heroic name off of in World War II, and kind of goes into great detail about that. He goes into really great detail about the relationship between Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy, and I always hear a lot about Kennedy's infidelities and different things like that, and the laundry list of them. And he does dwell on that some, but he also brings back the fact that Kennedy really was a family man, and he points out the fact that he feels like at that point in time, since the Cuban Missile Crisis, he and Jacqueline were very, very close, and he had actually kind of sort of trimmed down some of the infidelity, and they were actually probably at the best point in their relationship they had been in a very, very long time. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The one who fascinated me the most in all of it was Jacqueline Kennedy, and how much tragedy this woman had lived through. I did not realize that she lost a child while they were in the White House. Like, for some reason, in all of my whatever, and this is not really a time period I greatly focus on, nor was I somebody who was like absolutely obsessed with Kennedy and had this idea about them and the whole Camelot experience and everything like that. It wasn't really one of my big interests. So it's not that I just kind of knew the general gist of everything. Did not realize that they'd lost a child in the White House, which seems like that would be a very, very big thing today. Like, if that was happening today, that would be a very traumatic, notable thing. And it's one of those situations that I didn't think this all happens within 1 year. She loses a child, like, it's the Cuban Missile Crisis, she loses a child, then the assassination happens, and then she's almost immediately expected to, like, they don't even know what to do in the situation with, like, her moving out of the White House. Like, does she need to leave right away? Like, they don't even know the rules for that. And so I came out of this really feeling for like really empathizing with Jacqueline, and the fact that her life really was very tragic. That he does a very good job in kind of going into detail about what happened at the hospital and afterwards, about trying to get the body on the plane, and there was this whole debacle at the hospital that they wouldn't let it leave the hospital until the Texas coroner came, and then they were like, no, we're not doing that. So it's this whole almost very unsavory situation where they're kind of fighting over the body and like chucking it on the plane and stuff like this to get home and what have you. I don't know. This book just came away with me much more interested in the Kennedys, much more interested in Jackie Kennedy, much more interested in kind of who they were, and it even kind of focuses. It makes them all very likable, without really shying away from their more unpleasant qualities, because he doesn't. They were a dynasty. They were trying to make a dynasty, and he does point that out with Robert Kennedy and how much Robert Kennedy and LBJ didn't like each other, and this whole really nasty situation, petty. It seemed very petty between all of them, and how much they didn't like each other, and how LBJ really is the one who benefited the most out of everything, because he was kind of a non-entity and was politically fading into the twilight here as time went on, but then ends up being president. Yeah, it's just a very it's a lot of drama with all of it, and was very, very interesting. It was even more interesting because, like I said, I said in another video, I went to Arlington and saw JFK's grave. I have been to Washington multiple times, but I'd never been to Arlington, and this was the first time, and it was kind of fitting that I was reading this book while I was able to go see Arlington, where he is buried, and Jackie is buried too, and two of their children. The one that they mention in here who died after he was born, and another one who was stillborn or miscarried, basically. So this really is a good book about Kennedy, and if you want something that's very, very readable and kind of really gets you into this whole Camelot mythos, and it really is, it wasn't the historical Camelot I believe she was trying to tie all this to, Jackie Kennedy. I believe she was more trying to tie it to Camelot the musical, which was very big during this time period. And if you know Camelot the musical, it ends tragically, and I don't think Jackie was doing that necessarily. She wasn't doing it with that in mind at the time, but it ended up being much more fitting than it had a right to be, because the musical is basically this one shining moment where everything goes well and everything's doing great, and then there's like these minor little incidents that happen, and then everything, just like the Camelot myth, just falls apart at the end and ends in this very, very tragic situation. But everybody can look back and be like, there's this one moment that something great was happening. And unfortunately, that fits very, very well with what actually happened with Kennedy. There's also quite a bit of talk about Oswald in here and sort of the insanity that he was up to, and he mentions a little bit the fact that there's conspiracy stuff and whatever, but he also lays out the case that if Oswald had been the only shooter, that also seems plausible based off of the information that is available. So this this book was surprisingly very even-handed and very, very good. And I didn't... These Bill O'Reilly, when somebody slaps their name on stuff, you don't necessarily... I know they're doing it for marketing value, but you don't necessarily know what quality you're going to get out of it. And fortunately, most of these have been very good quality, the ones that I have read, basically because whoever is actually doing the writing is a competent historical writer and pretty good at making it very interesting. I don't remember who the one was on Killing Reagan, who the secondary person was, but this one is very, very good. And if you just want a quick overview of the Kennedys and sort of what all went on with everything, this is probably my best recommendation on what you should read, rather than something that is much more in-depth and gets into policies and all sorts of different things like that. This is a fast kind of thriller almost of a read and seems to really capture a lot of everything. So I would very much recommend. This is probably one of the better books I've read this year, just to recommend this one as a historical kind of novel. Not novel, it's not fiction, but a historical book that is very, very readable, like a novel.